Hello, friends and fellow moms, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Moms on the Air podcast. I'm your host, Katie Mahon, and I am joined by my co host and wonderful daughter who just turned 1, Maddie Mahon. And this week, I'm so grateful to be joined by MSarah Primiano, and we're going to be discussing speech and language development for kids, which for me, that's something I'm very interested in as my daughter's talking up a storm. And sometimes it's a little bit of goo goo gaga. Sometimes we hear mama. Sometimes we hear dada. But I think it's time to hear from the experts. So, Sarah, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to be a guest on your awesome podcast. I've actually I've had my own baby this past March of this year, so I can definitely say I have found the other guests that have been on your podcast to be really, really awesome to listen to and hear their experiences and their stories. And just if I can just say right off the bat that being a first-time parent myself, it is really, really illuminating to see things on the other side in
Absolutely.
regards to my work.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to me when I became a mom that didn't make sense
Hmm.
until I became a mom, and then I just was like, "Oh, I get it. I get
Yeah,
it."
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the things was like the constant like bags under your eyes where you always see moms say, "Why do they look so tired?" And then, the sleepless nights, which you're going through right now. It's yeah, I get it. I get it. Thank goodness they make under eye patches that don't really work that well with getting the dark circles.
And thank the
Um,
universe for caffeine to
yes,
get
that's
through the day.
true. That's very true. So, Sarah, I think let's just dive right into it. For little ones who kind of just start
Mhm.
talking, how do their speech and language develop?
So that is a fantastic question. And I just want to preface this by saying when I do discuss the speech and language development, I'm going to refer to children who are neurotypical rather than neurodivergent.
And Sarah, sorry to cut in. I think it might be a good idea too. We could just give our listeners a little bit about your background because I introduced you, but I didn't do you justice. So if you could just tell our listeners before you dive into that question what your background is, I think we'll move forward.
Absolutely. So I am a licensed speech language pathologist and I work primarily with pediatrics. So kids really of all ages, but I absolutely love working with really young kids. So toddlers, babies, all of that. They're adorable and I've enjoyed working with families of that age group. I've been working out in the field for about 2 years now, and I'm currently living in Virginia, but we are preparing a pretty significant move to Texas. So that's where I'll be continuing my practice.
No, and that's great. And the nice thing about your practice is that you're able to impact kids all over the place.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's why I absolutely am very passionate about what I do. And I'm just so thankful that we have this field to help families and educate others and empower them um, to help their children and set them up for success.
So, what can I do as a mom as people started listening before they heard my lovely co-host chiming in a little bit? What can I do to help, Maddie's speech and language develop?
So I will say, when it comes to speech and language development, it's not a 100% concrete, like this is going to look the same for every child. But we do have years and years of research that do show, those developmental milestones that I'm sure you have Googled or your pediatrician has shared with you.
I read in all the
Some things,
books.
yep. So some things to look out for as your child does get over. But I will emphasize that the first 3 years of a child's life is so crucial and critical for their speech language development. The growth that we see as their little brains matures and just learns more and more every day. It is so critical. So that's why I'm so passionate about this topic, because there's so much that occurs. And as a parent, I can see that can be extremely overwhelming to know exactly what's going on. Should I seek a speech language evaluation? Is there something more going on here? So for you and your daughter, I would say the best environment for speech and language for a baby is a environment that is very rich in sounds, sights, and a key word here is consistent exposure to the speech and language of others. And a really key figure for that is you, Katie, as her mom.
Yeah.
You are a huge component of her speech and language development. Not to say that there's all that pressure, but you have a wonderful opportunity of, working alongside her for that. So during the first few months of a baby's life, as I'm sure you know, especially with newborns, there's not much talking going on per se, right? They're not saying their first words yet. They'll start cooing and babbling. So some ways that I would recommend is to really, really engage with your child. So get face to face with them, imitate all the silly sounds they're making, even if you don't quite know what they're saying.
Yeah.
And a great thing I always tell parents is you can practice turn taking, right? So if she starts babbling something and, pauses, then you can say something back to her, and then pause and see if she'll add something on to the conversation. So that's a great way to introduce her to turn taking, which is very important in conversations, right? We don't want to keep talking over the person that we're talking to. But one thing I will recommend for parents with a year-old or 2 years old or even a 3-year-old is don't constantly prompt your child, right? So if you're trying to get her to say bye to dad, try not to constantly say bye-bye. I want to hear you say bye-bye. Now you say it.
Well,
So
she's
that
waving to you right now.
yeah, she is. Hi. So constantly prompting like that will increase pressure for your child.
Sure.
And social interactions should be fun and they should be spontaneous. So what you could do instead is model that for her a lot. Every time dad comes in or comes home, you could say, "Hi, Dad. Nice to see you. Welcome home." Or, just model that across different contexts multiple times throughout the day. But using that constant prompting can have some adverse effects down the road
Sure.
too. It can make her dependent on you to prompt her rather than her trying to initiate things herself eventually.
So
Um,
yeah, no, just kind of going off on that.
yeah.
We were fortunate enough that Miss Maddie's first word was mama. Um, so does that technically count as a real word? Do I have bragging rights with my husband?
Off the bat, I want to say absolutely, that's amazing. But my question for you would be, how often have you heard her use that word, mama, and how is she using it? Is she looking at you when she says it,
He
or
actually has been, which has been nice. Where and like that was something we kind of made it a point to do with kind of looking at me saying mama and looking at my husband saying dada. So
that's good?
that's yeah. But and obviously she says a lot of goo goo gaga kind of language. So what, in your opinion, professional opinion, what counts as a real word?
So a real word is really a word that is used consistently and intentionally. So if she just says a word out of nowhere and she just kind of says it sporadically, she might not really know what the word means, but maybe she's heard somebody say it
Okay.
and maybe it's capturing somebody, the attention, but she might not know what it means. So really a real word is one that's used consistently and with intention.
Okay.
And so for example, too, it doesn't have to be the exact pronunciation of the word. So I've heard a lot of kids who might say wawa for water. And that if they are using wawa to refer to water, something to drink consistently, intentionally, that is absolutely a real word, even if it's wawa. Because at this age, we're not expecting them to be 100% intelligible. we call that an approximation when they're saying most of the word, but not fully and completely. But I also want to mention that sound effects can also be counted as first words. So if she was playing with a car and she says beep beep or
What about
boom
right now,
boom,
what she's doing?
that's more of a vocalization. I think she's trying to talk.
She does that a lot.
Yeah, she's it sounds like she's got a lot to share with the world. She's got a lot to say.
Absolutely. That's why she's a podcast host at
Yeah.
age 1.
But a cool thing I always tell parents too is another word that people don't really realize that could be a real word are signs, like sign language.
Yeah.
A really common one like more, all done. Those are absolutely true words as well. If they're
When's a
used.
good time to start teaching the sign language? Because, I see a lot of the times people say, oh, you should do that. But, obviously when the kid is, when the baby is, 3 months, 4 months, I don't think it would be ideal. Like probably when she's 1, or should I have started it a little bit earlier?
I would say at any point, language learning for children happens at birth, right? They're seeing, they're hearing. They might not know immediately as a newborn. But just an example, my son is 4 months old. And when he's on like the little bouncer swing, and he loves that movement. When he's doing that, I do model like the word more, and I'll pair that with a sign like, oh, you want more swing? You want to swing some more? It is never
That's
too
great. That's
early.
a good tip.
Yeah, it's never too early. And I'll tell you why. When kids are really young, their motor skills in their mouths are not fully developed. So it might be trickier for them to verbally say more. And it might be easier for them to move their hands, like, use the sign for more.
Okay.
So it absolutely, you can use it at any point. You can use it now. I always recommend pairing some of those functional signs with verbal models as well to do both at once.
No, that's an interesting thing. And I mean, I'm honestly, after we're done recording, I'm going to give her dinner and I'll probably try that.
Absolutely. That's a great way. If she wants more of whatever it is you're having, you could say, oh, you want more? Sure. Let's get you more. So I would recommend pairing that together though with the word more, like the sign and the verbal model. I think that would be an excellent functional activity to use that with, right? Is during meal times.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And kind of shifting topics a little bit. I mean, something that you see all the books, all the, every doctor, every, person who is a mommy expert, baby expert, they tell you read to your child, read to your child, read to your child. What, luckily, I think for Miss Maddie here, she is semi interested in books at times. I think more of the colors, but in your professional opinion, what do I do if my child doesn't seem interested in reading yet?
Great question. I want to ask you, whenever you're reading to your child, what position are you guys in when you're reading together? Like, is she
Um,
sitting in your lap and you're holding the
yeah,
book
usually
like
actually
this?
like this.
Yeah. I know that is such a you see that everywhere. That image of the baby in your lap sitting together. It's very snuggly, warm. But here's the thing: for somebody of her age or younger, they are not developmentally ready to focus on. I have a book right here, so I'm just going to use this. They're not ready to focus on words or pictures. They want social interaction. So
Okay.
what I always recommend is getting face to face. So like
Okay.
so like if she was sitting there and she's, staring at you face to face, hold the book like this.
Okay.
And you also don't have to read stories word for word, but really enunciate and really emphasize certain words in the story, point to the pictures, make it silly, make it goofy, tickle her, depending what the story's about. But my biggest thing is be face to face, make it into a social interaction because she's just not old enough to really find all these letters and words super interesting. But if mom is doing it with her, and mom is giggling and mom is pointing and you're pairing that social interaction with a story and you're face and you're face to face together and you're sharing that wonderful experience together. So position is everything. I would absolutely read it read a story together face to face rather than, with her in your lap like this. Because
No, that's a very good tip. I mean, we have a few people who are watching live, and we just got a comment on the live stream saying, "Great advice. I would never have thought about that," and that's for me the same thing.
yeah, and like I said, that's such a common image that you see, right? Is reading a story together, the book's in front of you, but really face to face interaction. Babies love that. They love that social interaction, especially with their mom, right?
Yeah.
So,
No,
especially with their mom.
it's a fun, definitely a fun time, and I obviously, as a baby kind of, grows, you see them, develop their own little language, their own little communication system. If I was concerned about, my child's speech or language development, what do I do? When is it, too early to pull the alarm, or when is it the right time? Or, in your professional opinion, what's the milestones to look out for?
So I can absolutely share with you a general idea of what we would consider to be things of concern, but I would absolutely stress that as a parent, you are the expert in your child, right? And I know there's developmental milestones out there to look into, but what I always tell parents, you are the expert. If your gut is telling you that there might be something more going on, why sit around and worry over that? I would absolutely recommend at any point, if you have any concerns, talking to your pediatrician, um, just to see what your pediatrician might think. And if anything, seek a speech and language evaluation. Worst comes to worst, you do this evaluation and the speech therapist says, wow, your child's actually doing fantastic. Like they are on par for their age. You've got nothing to worry about, but they can still give you some really cool strategies to use at home to continue that. Or reassure you that there's really nothing to be concerned about right now. I understand myself now being a first time mother, you worry over everything,
Yeah.
right? Is my child on par with this? Oh, he's not here, but this other child is. So what does that mean about my child? I would never hesitate to reach out and just ask professionals. We're here for you guys. We're here to reassure you. We're here to educate you. But I will say for like 12 to 15 months, if they're over that year mark, a child usually says their first true word around the first year. But if they're approaching midway closer to the year 2 and they're not really saying words, or they're not really like turning when their name's being called, or they're not really
Right.
blabbering anymore.
Yeah, I was just told today at her pediatrician appointment that she's at a phase now where she's going to be testing me with discipline. So that's like another thing to look forward.
They're testing those boundaries, huh? But those are just some ideas. So yeah, if they're not really saying their first word, or if they were saying words and all of a sudden they're just not, it almost seems like they're quieter than they were. Definitely look that into, because it might be something completely you might not realize. It might be maybe they have an ear infection and they can't really hear as well or something, and they might just need to have that looked into, or maybe they would benefit from a little bit of early intervention. So the earlier the better. Research shows there's a lot of positive treatment outcomes if you approach it early on rather than the wait and see approach.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, Sarah, I want to be mindful of your time, especially with your little one, in that it's almost dinner time. So, what is the best place for people to learn more about you and the services you provide?
So I do have an Instagram account. My username on Instagram is the Speech Lady SLP on there. And I also do have a TikTok account with that same username. I use my platforms to just share basically what I'm talking about today, like a lot of strategies that parents can use with their children, or just some helpful information about childhood development regarding speech and language. So those are two great platforms that you can get more information from me.
That's great. And so I know you're going to be moving to Texas. but like I'm based in New Jersey. So can people access your services all throughout the country?
So, no, they would not be able to. And that's because I am currently licensed for the state of Texas.
Gotcha.
So I only provide services to those who are residents in Texas. I can provide services virtually, though, but still has to be in the state of Texas where my
Okay.
license is.
Makes sense. Anyway, Sarah, I want to thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insight, your expertise. I mean, me right now, as a mom of a 1 year old, I am, appreciate it more than you know. I wish you the best, especially you and your little one. May you get more sleep. And I hope
Thank
you'll
you.
join us for a future episode.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And if you do have any questions about your daughter's speech, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be
I
happy to chat more. So I'm always available for that. And thank you again for having me on your show. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in for today's episode. I hope you'll join us next week. And be sure to follow our official Instagram account at Moms in the Air and subscribe, where we will review our next guest. And thank you again for joining us today, and for everybody who watched live. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe wherever you're listening. Give us a 5-star rating. And until next time, I'm Katie. This is Maddie, and we are the Moms on the Air podcast.